Established over 100 years ago, Watkins Books is one of the world's oldest and leading independent bookshops specializing in esoterica. We have the widest selection of esoteric books in the UK, and our friendly and knowledgeable staff are here to assist you in a unique ambience of our shop. So come and visit us in the heart of London as we're open every day.
Does your book, film, resource, product, or business change people's lives for the better? Hi, I'm Jackie Lappin, founder of Conscious Media Relations, a unique boutique PR firm that helps you connect with your mind, body, spirit, and conscious lifestyle audience in a big way. We reach 3,500 specialty media and all the key mainstream outlets in the United States. I invite you to explore our radio media tour that connects to 2,600 personal growth radio shows. There is just nothing else like it. Come check out our website and read our rave reviews.
The comments and views expressed on The More Show are those of the people that make them and do not necessarily reflect the view of Kevin Moore, The More Show, or this radio station and its affiliate or sponsors. This show is for entertainment purposes only.
Broadcasting from the UK and across the world online. You're now watching the UK's only alternative late night talk show, and I'm your host, Kevin Moore. For the next hour, I'll be covering subjects that will open up your mind and provide you with information you may have never heard before. On today's show, I'm joined with Dr Mincolla, who is a natural health care practitioner and has transformed thousands of lives over the past 30 years. Now, he has integrated ancient Chinese energy techniques with cutting-edge nutritional science in his innovative electromagnetic muscle testing system, or EMT for short. Now, Mark maintains a personal practice in Massachusetts, where he lives, and joins us today to discuss his latest book, The Whole Health Diet, a transformational approach to weight loss. Dr. Mark Mincolla, welcome to the show.
Great to be here. Thanks for having me, Kevin.
It's great to have you on. And, you know, sometimes I never quite know where these interviews are going to go, or actually... I only get the information about the guest coming on a day before, and when yours information landed on my desk, I was like, well, I wonder how this fits in with the show that I do. But of course, after doing a little bit of research, it absolutely does, and it was fascinating just to read about yourself and what you've been up to. But just to begin with, just tell the audience a little bit about yourself.
Well, Kevin, for the past 3.5 decades, I've worked with 60,000 appointments, dealing with alternative medicine and strategies that are nutritional, biochemical, supplement, vitamin-wise, etc. Try to give people alternatives to dealing with disease, sickness, health-related conditions from a natural perspective.
Yeah, and that's so important, that natural perspective. And if you don't mind me asking as well, did you have any sort of, what was your sort of upbringing as well? I mean, I ask my guests this a lot, but it's always very interesting. Was it a religious or spiritual household?
Not really, but I think my dad was a great influence over me. My father was pretty much the kind of guy who worked really hard helping out with the family efforts to beat colds and flus and be content with things from a natural vitamin C perspective. So he was a vegetarian, he was a yoga expert, he was a great influence.
Because I see a very, your work, so as a doctor as well, and a PhD, there's a lot of spiritual aspect in your work. And I think I might have mentioned one just before we started recording this, which is, obviously a being of service, which is what you do. And I think that I'm not trying to say that other people who are, doctors are not of service, but of course they are. But I think it's the direction your work comes from. For example, ancient Chinese energy. That has a big influence on your work, doesn't it?
Absolutely, no question about it. There's a lot of energy systems that I've developed taken from Chinese medicine. And I think probably back in the mid-'80s is the time that I've kind of had my growing spurt there. Spent a lot of time studying with Chinese masters and learning the ins and outs of Chinese medicine, what they call qi, the movement of energy, life force, and developing systems from that core information. my mother actually had a lot to do with my intuitive, my spiritual, my heartfelt connection as well, because my mom was very intuitive, very gifted, very heartfelt person. So my dad's yoga and vegetarianism, my mom's spirituality and intuition kind of blended, led me in the direction of alternative medicine and energy-based medicine.
Right. Okay. So that was a big influence for you then.
Huge.
Okay. This is now starting to make some
sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Where this all amazing side of you is coming from. Now, okay. So if you could sum it up for the audience before we get into this, what is your mission?
I think the word service is the word that you use properly, and I think that's the word that motivates me to make a difference. I feel like we've all come to this planet to make a difference, to kind of find our own purpose for being here. This is a rare trip that we all make. There's a lot of important options that we can take care of business in many different forms of life. So for me, it's all service-oriented. It's about healing. It's about making a very powerful difference at a spiritual level, at a soulful level.
Yes, absolutely. Very powerful, very powerful. And, your book, The Whole Health Diet, A Transformational Approach to Weight Loss. Obviously, in America, I suppose it's a different scenario to over here in the UK. Would you say in America that there's a lot more overweight people in a sense?
Oh, yeah, of course. I think America leads the world in probably improper food consumption, improper food manufacturing. I think food has become a real problem in America. Obesity has become a growing problem. By the year 2030, we're supposed to have the equivalent of 13 states that are clinically obese.
Yeah, and I when I was saying those words there, I hated saying that. I hate, saying that people are obese because, it can be quite. It's quite a. I hate to think it's a cruel thing to say, but
it's a medical term.
It's a medical term. I'm saying it if I'm coming from the perspective of trying to help. Help.
Not being critical.
Yeah, without being critical, absolutely. It's in our society nowadays. It's so difficult to do that because so many silly programs are made, around this issue. Yet they never get to the core of the problem.
Well, you think about the fact that every year there are 50 million American dieters, Kevin, spending $40 billion on a 95% failure rate. So to me, the reason for that failure is because nobody's going beyond calorie counting. They're dealing with the problem purely by counting. It's purely mathematical. I think the key is you got to get into people's hearts and souls and emotions, get in touch with emotional eating. And I think the book that I wrote actually tried to do a lot of that work.
What does it do to the body, to the organs, to the heart and every other organ when someone is way over their recommended weight size?
It puts a tremendous amount of strain and pressure on the circulatory system, the immune system. It produces inflammation at a biochemical level. Years ago, we used to think of inflammation as a tennis elbow. We now know that inflammation is responsible for 72% of all disease, including heart disease and cancer. So the key here is we're producing a lot of inflammatory chemistry that really runs the risk of serious expression genetically that can take lives and does take lives.
So in your opinion then, how do we end the battle with obesity from your perspective of work?
I think we need to approach it holistically. I think that's the key. That's why I wrote the book, The Whole Health Diet, because part of the reason that the failure is so remarkably great is because people aren't taking the time to go deeper. They're not taking the time to get into the emotional and the spiritual and the dietary from a deeper perspective. I think that they're very shallow approaches, not dealing with the holistic component of life. So I've approached all my problem-solving health issues over the past 33 years with holistic approaches. I decided to tackle diet and obesity with a holistic approach.
Okay, so absolutely, because, we're emotional beings, we're spiritual beings, and, I'm sure your truth and my truth is, that we have a soul as well,
No doubt about it.
Yeah. So how, using that ideology, how do you approach weight loss then? Are you coming from you tell us, yeah.
For starters, I write about in the book, I say for starters, for permanent weight loss, not momentary weight loss. The heart of the matter is the heart itself, emotionally speaking. People do a lot of emotional eating. I don't know about your part of the world, but certainly over here, there's a tremendous amount of stress and pressure and tension, social pressure, day-to-day pressures of life. I meet with people all day long, and I just hear the stories about stress and tension and pressure. It creates so much mental and emotional suffering. And people use food as a means of kind of washing it down, pushing down all those horrible feelings and all that pain and suffering. So for starters, the heart is the heart of the matter.
Wow, that is just so true. Does that come from loving yourself?
That's a great way to put it. I think it does indeed, and I think it comes from a lack. I think that people are not really, they're not really brought up with that natural instinct to tap into their authentic self, their soul. People don't think of themselves as souls; they think of themselves as mechanical beings, with personalities. They tend to see themselves in an unfit manner. They tend not to be really particularly fond of the self. I think it begins with that central connection to soul, to something that extends far deeper and far beyond personality and limitation. To tap into the part of us that is unlimited, part of us that is really, for all intents and purposes, the part of us that is the deeper part of self. To find a love for that process, that unfoldment.
Yeah, because when we are over eating portions that are just beyond what we need to consume, and we're not burning it off through any exercise neither, that there's an emotional attachment to that food, isn't there?
There is. I say it's a matter of feeling the emotional energy outward, not feeding it downward. It's what I call the food or feel component. And people tend to feel the pressure internally, what I call the emotional volcano. They tend to stuff it with food. So I think the objective is to demystify emotion as pure energy and to learn how to release it and embrace it, listen to it, and make a connection to it.
Yeah, because they're coming from fear, aren't they? And do you think that's the fear of what they're not facing up to, or what issues there are in their life that's causing this obesity in a sense?
It's the fear of pain and vulnerability. I think the key is to face it, to demystify it. To look directly into the eye of your source and to let whatever is in there come forth and to grieve it out and to talk it out and to act it out and to cathartically remove that energy, as it were, which is stuffed within the core of our heart. I think it's pure energy, and again, we have the power to intellectually and spiritually demystify it and release it, as opposed to being driven into bad food choices and addictive behavior and alcohol and drugs and all that stuff.
Well, yes, because they can all play a part in it as well.
Addiction is addiction, regardless of whether it's addiction to food or whether it plays out with drugs or alcohol. Same thing. We're trying to bury the hurt and suffering and create a distance to try to create a system of denial.
Absolutely, and I suppose you've kind of summarized there, really, what's wrong with a typical approach. But just to ask you that, what is wrong with a typical approach to weight loss and dieting, in your opinion?
My opinion is it's purely mathematical. It's purely addition through subtraction. The idea that we just want to count the calories and we want to minimize the calories in and exercise them out, and purely turn into a mathematical equation which just simply doesn't reach far enough or deep enough and have the ability to matter long enough.
In your book as well, the first chapter is everything is energy. Everything. So what you're saying there is everything is energy based, including us and the food.
Of course. Back in 1921, we awarded Einstein the Nobel Prize for E equals mc squared, which tells us that energy and matter are interconvertible and transferable concepts. There's no different. It's a different way of looking at life, a different perspective. But everything that is materially based, the cell, our tissues, our organs, everything physical is actually an energetic component to it that we tend not to look at. Food is energy, people energy, emotions are energy. I think when you start looking deeper at the energetic level, you have more applications available to make a difference and to be more successful with weight loss permanently.
Absolutely, because I believe part of your work as well, a big portion of it, is energy dieting. Could you just explain what that is to us?
Sure. As we point out, everything is energetic. Food has energy. People have energy. And in theory, if you take a food and just simply hold it close to your body, there's an energetic interaction, an energetic response. And you can actually use the muscles to determine whether it's a strong and a positive or a weak and a negative response. So if I was sitting with you in your studio and I took an apple and held it to your throat close to your body near your thyroid gland, and checked your muscle resistance, you'd either have a positive or a negative response. If it's negative, obviously there's not a food that does well with your thyroid, your energy, metabolic level. So I tell you to avoid that food. That's not an optimal weight loss food for you. And I teach people in the book, The Whole Health Diet, how to basically partner up with a loved one, how to muscle test your foods, all your different foods, and to score up what I call a map, a food map, to determine the most optimal energetic foods to help you support your metabolism.
Well, that is very, very unique, and that must be the EMT, the electromagnetic muscle testing that you're talking about there.
That's exactly what it is.
Right. And you came up...
Many different applications. The book basically shares a number of different applications and teaches the reader how to engage in that process. It's quite special.
Now, obviously, you have clients all over the world, thanks to, Skype, and of course, previously, obviously, the telephone, people still use the telephone, but, Skype has allowed you to have a client base around the world. How does EMT work if you're long distance?
The main thing you want to do is teach the patient or the client, or the subject or the reader, through whatever medium, how to actually practice the process on their own. So a lot of it is through teaching, through the administration and the education of how to practice the whole procedure and the techniques.
Right. Okay. So yeah, that's how it's working, and anyone can get in contact with yourself, and just remind us what your website is as well, please.
Yeah, sure, Kevin. It's Mark, M-A-R-K, Mincolla, M-I-N-C-O-L-L-A, MINCOLLA.com, markmincolla.com.
Okay, wonderful. Well, your book's been flashing up on the screen, and I'm sure it's got the website on there as well, so people can contact you that way. This is such a different approach to weight loss. It struck me when I was just researching you before this interview, just how completely different it is, and with having the ancient Chinese energy techniques in there. One thing that I've always found curious is when I go to Asia, they don't really consume dairy products. What does the dairy products have to do with weight gain, do you think?
Well, back to the equation that we mentioned earlier, the inflammatory prospect. Inflammation leads to obesity and heart disease and cancer, etc., etc. It's a matter of good fats versus bad fats. And hormones of all natures are manufactured from the raw materials of fats. There's a fat called arachidonic acid, which is a bad fat that's inflammatory that dairy products actually feed into. So the amount of arachidonic acid from dairy products actually induce inflammation biochemically and induce a higher weight carriage.
So how would we know? Well, I suppose unless you've had the test with yourself, you're not gonna know. But I mean, I suppose it's difficult, isn't it, for us to discover what fats are good for us personally and what fats are bad. Then is that what we're saying?
Well, I think that's basically true. But there are simple pathways, biochemical pathways. The arachidonic acid, the bad fat that leads to inflammation, is called arachidonic acid, and it's produced by things like most peanuts, dairy products, red meat, egg yolks, not egg whites, but egg yolks, and sugar products. Those are the primary carriers of arachidonic acid that actually do impair the process of metabolism and increase the inflammation prospect.
Right. Okay. So I guess I guess it depends what you do in the daytime as well. Exercise wise, I mean, if is it exercise must play a large part? Do you not think in helping to tackle your weight gain?
Yes, exercise, of course, is an important co-factor. I think that to some simplistic aspect of this process, it's a matter of counting calories. We've talked about that kind of from a negative perspective, but let's face it, the final analysis of counting calories is an important part of the equation. And exercise is one way to make the calories add up the proper way, because obviously it comes down to taking fewer calories in and burning more calories. And I think that's where exercise comes into play. So it is definitely important. I just think that any of the components to weight loss and obesity that we talk about in the whole health diet are really important three-dimensional components that are rarely spoken about. So we want to help people to kind of get back on their game by covering virtually all the bases, many of which are never talked about.
It's funny, well, it's not. It's actually quite amazing that, I've got you on today to talk about this because I can use the word spiritual perspective because that's what your work's based in. A lot of the people that come onto my show talk about, the law of attraction in a sense, in one way or another, that what you think of, you become. That what you put your focus to, you become. So every place that we're at, right, wherever we are right now, is down to what we've projected, where we think our value lies, where we think we should be, what we think we're worthy of. Do you know where I'm going with this? In the sense that we have to reprogram ourselves, and it's not just about the outside; it's the inside as well.
You can't separate the mind and the body. The mind and the body produce one magnetic field. They're unified, even though we tend to think of them as two separate issues. And one of the things I talked about in the Whole Health Diet is Carrie Morwich, but she did some remarkable research, a university researcher here in the States, that actually found that she took a group of 300 volunteers. Over the period of 6 months, she actually had them only imagining in their mind that they're over-consuming calories. And she found that there was a 56% reduction in calorie intake from these people. That by activating the anterior cingulate cortex, the anterior cingulate cortex is a part of the brain. It creates the same neurology whether you're imagining something as if you're really doing it. It's pretty powerful, and that's just one of many studies.
Isn't that so powerful? Yeah, absolutely incredible. Thank you for mentioning that as well. That's very, very interesting. In this process as well, I'm quite guilty of this, where I was brought up to eat 3 meals a day, but now I find myself eating when I'm hungry, and yes, I'll have my breakfast. Of course, I'll have something bare basic for breakfast, of course, but I do find myself eating when I need to eat. I suppose I'm a bit different. I'm weight training, but. What do you think that the idea of having regular feeding times in a sense?
I think 3 squares is probably not a bad idea. There's a remarkable hormone in the human body called leptin, Leptin. It was discovered in 1994, and it's presently thought of as the most important singular hormone in the entire human body. And it regulates so many systems and so many endocrine subsystems. It has so many responsibilities. It's absolutely essential to the process of healthy living. One of the things that it does, it actually regulates appetite, food cravings, weight loss. An important and vital weight loss component is this leptin. So one of the things they found in the research is that leptin requires 12 hours from the last bite of dinner to the first bite of breakfast in order to be produced. So if you're snacking at night, you're not going to produce leptin. Again, it helps you regulate your metabolism. So just by snacking at night, you can actually sabotage your entire metabolism. So I think eating in regular day-to-day intervals, 3 squares a day, not a lot of snacking, are the best way to go.
Right. Okay. And liquids. Do we drink enough? Do we drink enough water?
That's a great point. I think that the answer in general is no. I think most of the people that I counsel and I question at the beginning of the dietary intake, I ask them that question, of course, is one of the most important questions. By 60% say they don't drink enough water. So I think it's an important point, and people tend not to see the corollary between water and weight loss and metabolic efficiency. Metabolism is everything. Metabolism governs the rate of calorie burning and energizing and all that stuff, so it's pretty important stuff. There's two metabolic systems, anabolic and catabolic. Catabolic is when we waste and store fat. Anabolic is when we produce muscle. So the key is to produce a lot of anabolic chemistry. Water is essential. It's one of the first checkpoints for producing anabolic chemistry and manufacturing a higher degree of muscle over fat. Water is very vital. I say at least 40 to 60 ounces of pure water a day.
Okay, well that's well worth noting. I mean, I've come across some people who say, well, I'm just not, thirsty enough. If I'm thirsty, then I'll drink. If I'm not, then I'm not going to force myself to drink a recommended, intake of water per day. What would be your take on that?
My take on that is, you mentioned Chinese medicine a few moments back. I think the idea is that the ancient Chinese used to say, drink when you're thirsty and you won't exhaust your kidneys. There's some wisdom regarding not over drinking. I think the key is you have a lot of people that are getting obese and they're literally looking to lose weight and speed up their metabolism. I think that's really a key component. staying hydrated. So it depends on the individual. Everything comes back to bioindividuality. One of the beautiful parts of the whole health diet is it's about bioindividuality. It's about customizing. It's not about one size fits all. So we're testing people for water consumption, or I should say we're teaching people how to electromagnetically muscle test themselves for water consumption, food allergies, food intolerances, food energies, and to customize and personalize the process. And my answer there is it's got to be a personal issue. It's got to be festered. It's got to be discovered.
Right. Okay. Well, that's interesting. Yeah, and that is so true what you say. And I'm sure you've said that to other people. But one size does not fit all, and we are all individual. And when people come to see you, they'll get that sort of treatment where it's individualized towards you.
Exactly. And if I can't be there to do it with you, I'll teach you how to practice the system through the book.
Yeah, that's so true. And what are good foods? What are bad foods in your opinion?
Well, let's say that there are optimal foods, and to get away from the specific personalized approach like we just mentioned. There's some generic ideas that are pretty important that hold water. Generally speaking, the optimal foods for peaking your metabolism, for weight loss, for being vitally healthy, etc., and vibrant, would be lean proteins. It would be low starch green vegetables, and would be low sugar fruits. I'll give you examples. Turkey, chicken, fish, beans would be your proteins. Your vegetables would be broccoli, asparagus, zucchini, green beans, spinach, etc. And your fruits would be apples and berries and peaches and nectarines and tangerines and pears and that sort of thing. I think that's kind of a classic picture that we paint that increases the metabolic function. Back to what we said a little while ago, those are anabolic foods, not catabolic. They're not going to store fat. They're going to basically build muscle.
Okay. So that's yeah. And again, everyone, you would have an individual plan for that particular person coming to you, but that.
Yeah, but I think somebody could generically kind of embrace that kind of a concept and generally do pretty well.
Yeah, absolutely. And when the client does go through the process with you and is committed to it, How many weeks do you think it takes for them to see changes, or do the changes are the changes taken in place internally first before you see anything externally?
Well, number one, we're talking about weight loss at about 2 to 2.5 pounds a week. That's considered optimal. You don't want to lose fast, and I know there's an attractive notion that we lose more and it's a better thing. I think you want your weight loss to be under control and in balance. That would indicate 2.5 pounds a week, 10 pounds a month. So that's that, number one. Number two, one of the great consequential things that you'll tend to notice from a program like this, as you kind of said earlier, anti-inflammatory. The idea that your joints, the idea that your arteries, your heart, your muscles, your ligaments and tendons, your entire body will start to anti-inflame. So a lot of those aches and pains, a lot of that stress and strain that you're accustomed to feeling physically will tend to disappear, because the diet is basically anti-inflammatory. Remember, we said good fats versus bad fats. That's a huge component.
Yeah, and you just mentioned there. Well, we've kept mentioning the word inflammation. Just remind us what that is, and also, actually, I was going to ask you about arthritis as well, because you've kind of mentioned that as well. Because obviously, when you are, a bigger build, you've got more of a chance of arthritis. Does your work is it keyed in to sort of cure that as well? And what do you do to cure that?
Well, again, one of the interesting parts about inflammation we used to think of as an achy joint, which it still is, but it's taken on a greater meaning than that as well. Inflammation is referencing the idea that you produce certain chemistries that are hormonal. There's what are called icosanoid hormones that are much more expressive than testosterone and estrogen and progesterone. They're hormones, but they're not just gender-based. They're not restricted to gender function. These are hormones that actually help communicate and operate the entire body, system by system. They're quite special, quite important. And when they're not working properly, they produce inflammation. Inflammation is now thought of as responsible for 72% of all disease. 72% of all disease, including all heart disease, cancer, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, asthma, you name it. So the idea here is that we need to think in terms of healing in general, very generically, broad spectrum. by clearing up the inflammatory properties biochemically. So whether we're dealing with Crohn's disease, colitis, lupus, rheumatoid arthritis, heart disease, or cancer, I want to think in terms of clearing up that inflammatory response biochemically. That's our starting point. Then you can target after that, maybe with some supplements or some vitamins or whatever. But the key is you want to neutralize that inflammatory chemistry.
What if for some people they feel that, it's just in their genes? My grandfather, grandmother, that they were bigger people, and it's just something I've inherited.
Well, there's a gentleman by the name of Craig Venter. Craig Venter is a remarkable researcher. He was the father of the modern human genome. He's done arguably more genetic research than anybody on the planet. Back in February of 1991, he issued a statement that was essentially labeled. The title of the statement that he wrote was, "Genetic determinism has been dead for 25 years. We've only got 30,000 genes, and it extrapolates like 13.3% probability. So the key isn't whether your genes are fixed, which of course they are. You can't change a gene but 0.1% every 250 generations. You're not going to change your genetic profile. But we now know that genes get turned on and off. So there's healthy genes that get flipped on, unhealthy genes that get flipped on or flipped off. So the way we eat, think, behave, treat ourselves has everything to do with how we're turning our genetic engines on and off. So we can actually overcome many diseases, many supposed or once thought of as genetic limitations by learning how to program and reformat our genetic switches."
Right. Okay. But then, you could say that some people still remain bloated, after losing weight as well.
I think bloat has a lot to do with fermentation, Kevin. I think the idea that so many people are drinking wine and beer and champagne, using vinegar, using a lot of marinated food products. The key is fermentation produces acetic acid, pyruvic acid, lactic acid, carbonic acid, and ammonia, which create a lot of fermentation. It creates a lot of bloating. I say, look at it. If you're eating yeasty breads, what does yeast make bread do? It makes the bread rise. It makes your belly rise as well. So there's gases and there's agents that are gassy that produce a tremendous amount of bloat in the belly. So you lose weight and you're still not looking terrific because you're carrying a lot of weight over the belt buckle. That's actually part of the bloating process, which needs to be thought of as an inflammatory issue as well. So cut down on the yeasted breads, the vinegars, the marinated foods, beer, wine, and champagne, drink vodka and stuff.
Right, cut down on the yeast. That's very, very interesting. Okay. And what about the sugars then? Because there must be, there must be over 100 sort of different names for sugars on labeling, and
Actually,
right, yeah. And I'm sure that they're not always described on the food, maybe hidden. So what part do sugars play in all this?
I think there's a broader perspective here regarding sugar. I think that if we're thinking in terms of optimizing our health and our weight loss potential, we want to be thinking more in terms of organic foods, clean foods, getting away from the commercial labeling stuff. You don't have to read the labels because you're buying whole foods, clean foods, organic foods. Here in the States, I tell everybody that I work with, purchase the green and white label that says USDA 100% organic. Those are the guaranteed clean foods. Less packaged foods, less processed foods. Don't leave it to chance.
How hard is it for people coming to see you to see this process through?
I think it's pretty surprising because when I first started doing my work 33 years ago, I thought it was going to be a real tough grind. I've been pleasantly surprised for 33 years now. People seem to be really positive. Well, one of the approaches that I take is let's get you on a 21-day focus here. If I can just get 21 focused days of commitment out of you, we can go from there. If you're feeling significantly better in 21 days, you get a good reason to continue.
And what would you say for those who do go through the process with yourself and have completely successfully? What are they on the other side of that? Who are they on the other side of that?
They become highly animated. They become like devotees because many of these. I've worked with people who actually recover from terminal illness. Not more than a few, too, by the way. So the key is they're excited. They're sold. Their spirit is uplifted. They're changed. They become very dramatically transformed from the process. They become somewhat different in personality from the experience, but very much enlivened in the spirit.
From a spiritual perspective, why do you think that the soul chooses to have these experience of obesity in a sense, and so much restriction. Is that the word there really? Restriction? Is that what the soul's trying to experience? What it's like to have that restriction?
I think that there's also an experience here that we need to kind of take into account: the yin and the yang, the opposite polarities. People tend to go back and forth between the opposites to find their way to the middle. So spiritually speaking, I think people tend to find extremism, and they tend to kind of cling to this notion of being hurt on one side, exploring the opposite side, being hurt there, and finding their way back to the center point. There's a center point that I call the still point. It's a balance point. That is the optimal. You can't be healthier, you can't be happier, you couldn't be any better off than to be in the middle of that balance point. I think we have to experience both extremes before we get there.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I mean, obviously, I love America, truly do, and I will be moving over there one day. Thank you. I'd love to be over there, and I've been many times, and it's just amazing the range of food over there, and the size of the portions. I mean, they are massive size portions. But do you think, as you've seen in your work over all these years, that the food's becoming, there's healthier options to eat out nowadays? People are more aware of what they're consuming.
I think it goes back to the conversation we just had about extremes. I think America's become a place of great extremes. You couldn't find any place on the planet that has better, healthier, more wonderful options, or dastardly, horrible, treacherous options. I think we kind of expand both properties. I think there's a lot of people in this country that are fortunate. I know whenever I go to California to do lectures and book tours and things like that I'm thrilled at the hotels, how enlightened they are, and how organic produce is not an impossibility, and the food is so fresh and so clean and so delicious, better than anywhere I go. Not to cast aspersions on the Midwest, but I've done some tours to the Midwest, and the food just isn't quite as fresh, as good, as organic, and as wholesome. So, you have both experiences here. I think both extremes are readily available at all times. This is a great capitalist enterprise, no question about it. Whatever you want, you can get it. You can get anything you want in the city of New York, of course. Any time of day or night.
That's so true. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, do you think it's okay to treat yourself sometimes?
I tell my patients, pick one night a week: Friday night, Saturday night, or Sunday brunch with your loved ones, with your friends, and take whatever you want for dinner, for breakfast, for lunch. Just have your carrot dangling out in front of you all week long.
I love that. I really, really do. Yeah. So that's good. Yeah. So you can, you can go.
That's part of what keeps people going. I think if you keep the tension so intense constantly that it'll snap, and people go off the program and say, "The heck with that." You got to have this kind of. Back to what we said a few minutes back. It's all about balance. I think you want to have parameters, boundaries, margins. You want to make sense. It's got to be sensible. It's got to be realistic. It's got to be humanly geared. So I think we try to do that by saying, look, have fun one night a week and have whatever you like, and work toward that night and then get back in the saddle. You know what happens when they do that, Kevin? They're taught the lesson through their body of finding an equilibrium, because if you're feeling really good and taking really good care of yourself and working hard at it, detoxing, cleaning your body out, being healthy and vibrant, and you cut a corner, it's soul food, it's delicious, it's fun, but you feel pretty food hungover from it. You're dying to get back in the saddle, so it's kind of a nice repercussive bounce.
Yes, and you've only got one car. If we think of our body like a car, we've only got one car in this life, and as you would MOT your car and look after your car, you've got to do the same for your body. You really have, and yeah, exactly. So there's no point in self-harming. It all comes back to self-love in a sense. Things in balance. I think that's where I'm coming to here. Keeping things in balance.
I think it all comes down to consciousness
as well. Yes.
It's kind of like the idea that you have an option to either live unconsciously and have life happen to you. You can live consciously and have life happen through you.
Yes, and I'll go back to what we were saying at the beginning of this conversation as well about don't fear exploring yourself deeply, and I know that's part of the process that you initiate when coming to see you. I always feel that if you go beyond the fear, there's joy beyond there. There's always joy beyond the fear.
There's core essence. There's truth. There's joy. There's clarity. There's beauty there. It's a matter of going deeper to connect. I always say that people are afraid to go down into the land of the heart because of all the pain and suffering that is stored there. But if you go through it to the other side, you reach the soul.
And once you realize that you're a soul, you're not your body, and that you came from somewhere, home, you'll be going back there. But being here right now is so important, and looking after yourself and loving yourself is just such an important thing to do. And
there's a physical body, an emotional body, and a soul body. Just remember, the only body that doesn't have any pain is your soul body. There's pain in the physical body, there's pain in the emotional body, there's pain in the mental body, but there's not pain in the soul body. So we have access to a painless place called the soul body, the essence, the core, the source. So to take the time to investigate, as you say, deeper, and I agree with you, that you have the opportunity to go into a beautiful place that is not a soul body, and that is not a pain body, rather.
How many sort of holistic centers, I mean, I'm not looking for a figure, but is there a larger portion of holistic centers that do the sort of work that you're doing in America right now?
Well, I started in 1981, and I started back in 1981. There were darn few. Nowadays, there's actually quite a few. The state of California, Texas, Southwest Arizona, quite a few places. But I think most of those are large centers. There's a diminishing number of practitioners that I think are really viable practitioners. There's a new approach, I think, in Western medicine. There's a group of medical doctors in the country that are starting to practice kind of blended medicine or complementary medicine. They're still MDs, they still recommend and prescribe pharmaceutical medications. They open the door to the other possibilities as well. There's a lot of that happening. I come from the earlier generation, the earlier wave, if you will, of alternative practitioners, where you're either an MD or a PhD. It's either or, black or white, so there's not too much of that still going on.
How would you like to progress, to get your, to keep pushing your work, or to keep your work going?
I like to keep writing books. I've written 6 books now. I like to keep writing. I've got a great publisher. I got Penguin, which is part of Random
great
House.
publishing company.
You couldn't do better than that. So I think I've got a great publisher behind me who's thrilled with the work that I'm doing. They support me wholeheartedly. Continue to do wonderful programs like the Kevin Moore Show. I continue to reach out through books, television, media, radio. I did Dr. Oz last year 6 times. A lot of programs like
great.
That are helping.
Oh, well, that's great. If you can get on programs like that as well, yeah, that really helps to push this work that you've worked so hard on, and it deserves to be out there and be recognised, most definitely. Well, then obviously we're almost at the end of the show here, but what would you say could be possibly the most important message of your work?
I think the most important message is coming back to that idea that everybody is more than a physical body. Everybody's more than a mechanical being, more than a personality. Everybody is a soul, and there's a painless body in there called your painless soul body. I think there's just so much more limitlessness to what we're capable of. People are thinking in limited terms, self-limiting terms. They think that their pain is a guarantee, that they're just supposed to live with pain and suffering and misery. They're supposed to be limited because they're mere mortals. They don't think of themselves as limitless, infinite, and they don't think of themselves as deserving. When you work out of your soul body and you kind of work out of your soul consciousness, that all changes. So I think my message to everybody out there is that they need to explore deeper, as you put it. I like the way you put it, but the idea that they need to go to the next level, the next deeper level of depth, explore their soul essence, and their limitless self, and to fly free.
I love it. And if people at a distance, or maybe they're local as well in the States, but if people want to get in contact with yourself, just go to your website and they can make contact through your website.
Exactly. It's again Mark Mark Mincolla Mincolla.com.
Excellent. Well, Dr. Mark Mincolla, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a complete pleasure.
Kevin, it's been my honor. Thank you so much.
Well, we've come to an end on tonight's show. Don't forget that you can listen and watch all our past interviews on the More Show's official YouTube channel. Remember to subscribe to our YouTube channel for new daily shows. You may also find out more on all past and upcoming guests on the show via themoreshow.co.uk, and do like us on Facebook and Twitter for the latest updates. So until next time, be safe.